You could say what you want, but you got to be prepared for the consequences that's come along with it too.
Now, everything is about an algorithm. Everything is about how do I look. Everything is about, not even true journalism.
You can always turn pain into power by telling your story. So I think the real work that needs to be done is that media literacy has to now become top priority. We have to start teaching the general public how to consume media.
This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell.
From the Calling Post newspaper to CNN, Roland Martin to Joy Reid, Black journalists has always carried the weight of truth. But in an era when corporate media turned down the volume of our stories, it's up to us to turn it back up. Today, I'm joined with someone who has been doing that her whole entire career. She's a writer, a journalist, and media entrepreneur, Rhonda Crowder. Rhonda is the CEO of Rhonda Crowder Associates, a 15-year creative agency right here in Cleveland, where she built campaigns rooted in communities. She is the president of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists, a literacy advocate, an author, and the force behind Cleveland's Reads movement. Her works connects the dot between truth, culture, and empowerment. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to fight for the freedom of the press and the future for journalism and the power of owning your own narrative. This is Unmuted, the battle for freedom and the truth in Black media. Rhonda, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for having me.
Hey, you came up in an era where there was the Calling Post newspaper. We talked about Jet Magazine. We talked about Essence Magazine. We talked about all these other newspapers and outlets that were out there that were part of the things that helped get Black media and getting our message out there. And now things seem to be kind of different these days. Why don't you tell us about how it was back then when you got started in journalism and what made it the thing that you want to do and what made you want to get into that?
Well, Ken, it's probably best for me to note a few things. One, I never wanted to be a journalist.
Really?
No. Journalism was not my pathway. It wasn't, a dream of mine. My goal was to write books, plays, and movies.
Okay.
I went to Cleveland State. I got a degree in English with a specialization in creative writing, publishing, and editing. Never took a journalism class.
Really?
At all. But I got connected to journalism while at CSU. I became an arts and entertainment editor for The Cauldron. Mm-hmm. So that was my first taste of journalism. I got bit by the bug. But even after I graduated, I still didn't really want to go into journalism. I wanted to write for The Young and the Restless or or something like that. And then I needed a job.
Okay.
And because I had that experience with The Cauldron, I began to look at journalism again.
What was The Cauldron?
The Cauldron is Cleveland State's student newspaper.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Do they still have that?
They still publish it every week. It's a great opportunity for young people on that campus because you begin to learn the business. I mean, they run ads. It's just like running a professional media outlet.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know with things, and we'll get into that because part of our discussion is with the radio station being silenced now and things of that nature. That's one of the things going. But go ahead.
So graduated, moved away, came back, needed a job, and got connected at the Calling Post newspaper. And it's interesting because I didn't even realize the Calling Post was still around.
Really?
After they had moved from 105.
Okay.
It just wasn't as visible anymore. And a friend recommended that I try the Calling Post because I tried the Plain Dealer. I tried Cleveland Scene, Cleveland Magazine, all of the bigger, legacy media outlets here in this city. And I just, couldn't get a break with any of those. Even being someone who grew up in this community, who had a degree in English from a state school here and had that experience in college. So I went to the Calling Post. It's a beautiful story. I won't go into it right now. Well, I went to the Calling Post one day because I was leaving Progressive. I was just looking for a job at this point. And so I had went to Progressive for an interview.
Okay.
And on my way back, I just so happened coming down Shaker Boulevard on the north side of the street.
Right.
And I looked up and I saw the sign on the building that said Calling Post.
After you was looking for it because you didn't think it.
I didn't know where it was anything, you know.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, let me go. And I'm dressed, you know, because I was already dressed for an interview. I had copies of my resume. And I went into the building and I asked the receptionist, you know, are you all hiring for writers? And she said, well, the person you need to talk to isn't here. I said, can I leave my resume? She said, absolutely. She gave me the number of who I needed to speak to. I called the next day. I was told, we're not hiring any writers. Literally about a week and a half or so after that, Robin Simone, who was on 93 at the time, she was hosting a book club. And her book club was meeting at the Calling Post.
That's correct.
It was a Saturday afternoon. I had only been back in Cleveland for about a year.
Okay.
So I was still trying to, you know, get my feel around the community. And I said, well, let me go to this book club because I was interested in the book. I was familiar with it, familiar with the author was going to be there talking about her book. And so I go up there and afterwards, we're just kind of hanging around, having some conversation. And the author of the book just so happened to mention writing for the Calling Post. And I was like, oh, well, no, they're not hiring. I was just up here about a week or so ago, and they said they're not hiring writers. And the guy that we was having a conversation with said, well, you talked to the wrong person because we just had a writer leave yesterday.
Wow.
That person was former President Michael House.
Oh, okay.
And he said, do you have a resume? I'm like, no, it's a Saturday. I'm here for the book club. He told me to come back on Monday.
Okay.
When I came back with my resume. He took me upstairs to Connie Hopper's office.
Okay.
I sat down with her, convinced her, you know, why I would be a good fit for this job. And 2 days later, I got an offer.
Connie Harper, she was there for a while. She was really, really cool. Connie helped everybody.
Yes, yes.
But you didn't get a chance to work with John Lanier.
John Lanier, when I arrived, was out on medical leave.
Okay.
He came back for a very brief time, so I only had few encounters with John. Then he was out again, and then he passed away.
I had the great opportunity of sitting down with John Lanier. He was an interesting guy.
John was very interesting.
He was very interesting. He was one of those. I used to go in meetings with him for one thing and never came out with what I wanted. Never. But he always made me seem like throughout the meeting he was with me. He was going to give it to me. Then at the very end, he'd be like, but Ken, you know we're not going to do that. I'll be like, oh, man, I thought we were. Yeah, I understand, Ken. It sounds great, and I like it, and in principle, but we're a black newspaper, and we don't do that kind of stuff. Or he'll say something like that, or he'll get into that, and he used to hit me with that all the time because I was doing a lot of working with other candidates, and he was like, no, we're not doing that, you know. So it was interesting. So how did you like working for a black newspaper, and what was it like back then versus now? And then we'll talk a little bit about how that's changed.
So you said I was in journalism during the golden era. I came into journalism probably at the beginning of the end of the golden era.
Interesting. Okay.
So.
And you know what, because when you said where you came in, because Lanier and them was probably right in the golden era of it, and you're right.
They were definitely in the height of the golden era.
Right.
It was still a little golden when I first arrived, but shortly thereafter, we began to see the shifts. But once I started writing for the Calling Post, I knew immediately that's where I needed to be. Because, one, I never wanted to be a journalist.
Okay.
And so as I began to meet journalists that was working for other particularly print outlets and hearing their stories and how they were limited and what they could cover and just, starting to really get a feel for how this industry worked, I told myself, if I'm going to do journalism, I'm only going to do it for black people. Now, I didn't make a lot of money at the Calling Post.
That's correct. We know that.
But with my dreams and goals, I felt like it was a good place for me to, get my writing chops.
That's correct.
Build an audience. And I had the flexibility to cover anything I wanted to cover. I could go to Connie and say, okay, hey, Connie, I got this idea. I want to cover this.
That's correct.
Go for it. I couldn't do that stuff at other media outlets. And so I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I was there for 11 years.
Wow,
and had Connie not passed away, I probably would have been there a lot longer after that. I never even really saw myself leaving the Calling Post. I always saw myself connected in some kind of way or another.
So you made a comment where you said that you saw yourself, if I'm going to get into this journalist, I only want to do and cover black folks or black media. What was it about working at the Calling Post newspaper that helped shape that perspective for you? And working in Cleveland.
Yeah, so I began to learn how, there's not a lot of blacks in journalism, even to this day. I think that even I heard the statistic that newsrooms across the country, and this was back then, but I don't think it's too much of a change now, we only make up about 10%.
Okay.
Newsrooms across the country. So that told me something, right? The pathway, me meeting other journalists and understanding their pathways to leadership, their pathways to, covering the beats that they care about or telling the stories that they really care about was difficult.
Okay.
They were always fighting for a story to be told. Where I get a phone call about, Kenn just launched a new business. Okay, I could go cover that. Okay. I could cover the story about the lady that's turning 100, or the black man that's turning 100 years old. I mean, I ran a gamut of stories that when I first started, I was probably cranking out about at least 5 to 7 stories a week.
Really?
Yes. Wow. I was producing a lot.
So when you were there, how many reporters and stuff did you guys have working there?
When I came into the newsroom, we had 4 full-time staff writers, 2 copy editors. Then we hired another one, Felicia Haney, because she was hired she was there interning when I arrived, and then they hired her not too long after they hired me. And we also had Kevin Chilhurt, MC Chill, who was the arts and entertainment editor. So we had about almost 10, and that's not even including the freelancers, about at least 10, 8 to 10 on our editorial team.
How was it like working for Don King?
Here was the funny thing. If Mr. King showed up, that's not a good day.
No.
It's not. Okay. We don't want to see Mr. King showing up because something's about to happen.
Okay.
He's very hands off. He was very hands off of the newspaper. He didn't manage the day-to-day operations at all. So I have very rare sightings of Mr. King.
Or King stories.
King stories, yes.
We can say.
Yes.
So let me ask you this when we get into that. What do you see was the downfall of the newspaper? Ultimately, not to say it was anybody's fault, but ultimately, what was the reason why the Calling Post newspaper isn't as because it's still in existence now. Louis Moore, shouts out to Louis, is still running around taking pictures. And if you want some information in there, there's a way that you can get information into the Calling Post newspaper. But before I get into my next phase of that question, what do you think is the fashion or the reason why it's not as successful as it used to be?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons, and I'll kind of try to touch on a few. One, I don't think our community ever really fully understood how media works, right?
Okay.
So we'll hear, oh, well, I buy the paper. Paper sales is about 5% of revenue.
Okay.
Revenue for media outlets, the traditional model, is 90 to 93% advertising.
Okay.
So if we're not receiving the ad dollars, we don't have the revenue to sustain the model, to sustain the paper. And so you can go back to integration, onset of civil rights. You begin to see Black journalists moving into mainstream media outlets.
Okay.
With that, readers followed, right? Where eyeballs go, advertising dollars go. So, like, you can look back at the Call and Post, like at old editions of the Call and Post, and you can start to see a decline in advertising around the mid-'70s, definitely the early '80s, and just as the decades continue to move on. So that's one thing.
And that's interesting because you're right. It does follow. If Rhonda is my favorite person and Rhonda's now over at Essence, and Essence still Black, but maybe went to ABC or somewhere, ABC want those dollars because they want one of the reasons of bringing you there was to bring Black supporters and that viewership.
Absolutely.
So,
and we don't subscribe.
That's correct. That's correct.
So by having low subscription numbers, you don't have verifiable subscription. So you can't go to the advertisers and say, I have 10,000, 20,000, whatever subscribers. Now, back in the day, Black media could sell advertising just based on being Black media.
Okay.
But as the landscape began to change, the advertising dollars decline.
Let me ask you another question on to that, because you are an advocate in literacy and that kind of thing. Do you think, how much literacy play a role? And do you think back then we were reading more than we are now? And during that time, how much did literacy play a role in
I think literacy plays a huge part. I mean, because it requires reading.
Okay.
For newspapers in particular, you have to read it. And I saw that as an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage that I see is that we still have a population of low literate people. So if we can bring their literacy rates up, then we can begin to reignite newspapers in some kind of way or another.
Okay.
So it's, hand in glove.
And Cleveland has one of the largest literacy rates around. So I would imagine that had a lot to do with
low literacy. We have low literacy rates.
Right,
absolutely. Correct. I mean, Cleveland's illiteracy rates is around 66%, somewhere in there. So you're talking about more than half of our population.
Wow.
Is not reading at proficient levels. Now, even the plain dealer, I'm not sure today, but I know historically the paper was written at about a 6th grade reading level.
Wow.
To accommodate the population, the readership.
Did Call and Post read at a 6th grade level? I mean, did you guys keep that in consideration for your audience?
I don't ever recall us having that kind of conversation while I was there. And I never was told to dumb down my stories either.
Right.
I may have been told sometimes, especially as there was progression, to not write as lengthy. Don't write such long stories because people are not reading long stories anymore. But I was never told to, use more simpler language or things like that.
Well, let me ask you this before we get into some more serious stuff. Give me your best 3 you most proud of stories, either wrote for the Call and Post or anything.
Wow,
it could have been in high school that you say, you know what, I did this, and this was, I think, my best work.
I recently did a series of stories on racism as a public health crisis for Idea Stream when they was doing a Connecting the Dots series.
Okay.
Really proud of that. Going back to Call and Post, I was just like cranking them out, producing stories. But I still remember one of my most memorable is I interviewed a chief justice from South Africa. That was really cool, and he had lost an arm in the fight for apartheid.
Okay.
Lots of standout stories, but there was a young man who was probably like in the 6th grade. This is still one of my favorites. He was considered the pie king. Pie as in 3.14.
Oh.
He
I'm
was
sitting up
yeah,
here
no, not
like,
pie,
what,
eating pie.
Dude was making pie?
No. This young man
Okay.
he was like in the top 75 people in the world who can recite the most sequential numbers of pi.
Okay.
I didn't even know pi went past 3.14.
Hey, you heard what I was thinking about when you said pie. And this was in Cleveland.
He was I wonder where this young man is.
Wow.
There was some couple of
shout out to him.
There was a couple of
You see
impact
Rhonda said
stories.
she wanted to know what's happening
yeah,
with you.
I don't know where he is, but we dubbed him the Pie King. We
Wow.
put that story on the front page, above the fold. Those are the types of things that Black press can do. I remember. Here's just a quick favorite story.
Rhonda, it's you. Go ahead.
So we would oftentimes get calls from majority PR people. And so I would have my little litmus test because, you can go get a story anywhere. Why you calling us
Right.
to write? So we get a call from Boy Scouts of America. And she says to me, we are getting ready to graduate our Eagle Scouts. And I had to scratch my head because I said, I don't know too many young Black boys and Boy Scouts anymore these days, let alone making it to the status of Eagle Scout. So I said, well, do you have any Black boys in that group? Otherwise, I'm not writing no story about that. She said, well, I don't know. Let me check. She said, how many? I said, if you got one, call me back.
Okay.
She called me back. She had one.
Excellent.
This young man's name was Michael DeFleece. I will never forget him. He went to Benedictine High School. He was an Eagle Scout. He played football. Whatever was happening with his mother and father, he didn't even want to talk about that. He was being raised by his grandmother.
Okay.
And Mr. Quay Buick, who was heavy into Boy Scouts, was his mentor.
Wow.
And they came and they sat down and I interviewed this young man and he told me he wanted to be Secretary of State. And he was on his way to West Point. Those were the kind of stories that still stick with me to this day.
And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is that with the loss of outlets like the Call and Post, Jet Magazine, and all these other places where you had an opportunity to put that information in there, is now lost. What's the effect on us here locally as well as nationally?
Our stories don't get told, which journalism, storytelling is all about documentation. That's why the work that I do with Who's Who in Black Cleveland is very important to me because it's about documentation. When you think about the Call and Post, matter of fact, the Call and Post will be 110 years old this year.
Wow.
1916. Okay, so do you know the story of?
No, you might as well tell us that. If you know that story, you got to tell, because I don't know the story of the Call and Post.
The Call and Post dates back to 1916.
Okay.
There was a very significant incident, event that took place in Cleveland in 1916. There was an explosion in the mine down right off, right over the bridge. West 49th Street.
Okay.
It was a salt mine or something like that.
Yeah, the mine's still there.
The mine is still there.
Right.
So there was an explosion in the mine. Miners was dying, rescue workers was dying. They didn't know what to do. A fireman or a policeman or emergency worker, one of the such, remembered that there was a man in the community who had invented a gas mask. And he went to that man's home and told that man, these miners is dying. The man, who we know as Garrett Morgan.
That's correct.
Grabs his mask, runs out the house barefoot, gets down to the mine. The rescue workers do not want to put the gas mask on because it's this black man's invention. So Garrett Morgan and his brother puts the gas mask on, goes into the mine, starts bringing out miners and rescue workers.
Wow.
Days after that, the gas mask appears in the paper, but his name, picture, no mention of him at all.
Wow.
Garrett Morgan starts a paper. That's The Call. There was another paper operating in Cleveland. That was The Post. So it was two different papers. In the early 1920s, both papers is experiencing hardship, and there's an agreement to combine, to merge.
Wow.
Becoming The Call and Post.
And they both were black papers.
They both was black papers.
Wow. Here in Cleveland.
Here in Cleveland.
So the Call and Post originated right out of here, because I know it had some kind of national, but really right out of here, and that's what that is so deep. I guess I can say it now, 57 years old until I learned that today. Never.
I didn't know till I got to the Call and Post.
Wow. That is, and I don't know if anybody, I have never heard nobody ever say that. Everybody talk about Garrett Morgan. We talked about, Garrett Morgan and this and that, but they never tell what really happened about that. And they never, it's just shameful. And so from that, Call and Post newspaper was born out of that.
Call and Post newspaper was born. Wow. W.O. Walker comes to Cleveland in the late 1920s. Visionary journalism, extraordinary businessman, takes the paper to the heights that we know that it reached today.
That is really deep.
So once I began to learn that story, and as a writer, as a young black writer who grew up here in Cleveland and had never heard that story before.
You just blew my mind with it. I'm like, I'd never heard that.
That was something I knew I wanted to be connected to.
Wow. And we should do more to express that, as it relates to just what he's done for this community. And I ain't just talking about black folks, because there was more than black people he was pulling up out of their minds. There was
a celebration in 2016 down at the site.
Okay.
Descendants of those miners and rescue workers were there in tears, expressing their gratitude for Garrett Morgan rescuing, saving their family member.
Well, that's great. I
did a story on that too.
Well, that's good. That's a very happy ending. Yeah. I like God, because I was like, ooh, that was pretty bad. But I'm glad it all worked out, and he definitely saved a lot of lives and still saving lives this day from that invention. How do you keep the same energy in a digital age, especially now with everything is all about the algorithm? Back in those days, one of the things, like you say, with the Call and the Post and everything else, we have this talk where people say, we need the caucus back. Back in the day, we had a caucus and we all got together and we learned it. And we went to churches and we did all these other things. And we knew that back then that the community was more together on that kind of thing. The only way you were going to get that information was to be at the meeting. Whether you was at the meeting, your husband's at the meeting, somebody had to be at the meeting to tell everybody what was going on, because still a lot of black folks had to work. A lot of other, they had to do their thing. So everybody couldn't be at the meeting and everybody couldn't go to the meeting. So with that being the case, we had to be at these caucus meetings. You had to read that newspaper. You had to get that information, because that's the only way you're going to get that information that you're going to get. So with that being the case, now everything is about an algorithm. Everything is about how do I look. Everything is about, not even true journalism. I enter into this space, and I be very careful when people try to label me as a journalist. And I'm like, no, I'm not a journalist. I'm, and I think it was you who talked to me, and you tell me, no, it's more storytelling. And I say, yeah, I can tell stories. That's what I feel more in that. But I ain't no way near a journalist. I don't want to work that hard, because you got to really work and get your facts right and get your information right. And you got to be able to be a good writer to write that stuff. So I kudos to the journalists. But with this being this new age from then to now, how do you think that's really affecting us as a community?
I think it's information overload. We've seen this rise in disinformation.
Now everything is about an algorithm. Everything is about how do I look. Everything is about, not even true journalism. I enter into this space, and I be very careful when people try to label me as a journalist. And I'm like, no, I'm not a journalist.
Misinformation. And look at the political climate that we have today.
Right.
All of that, I believe, is a direct result, impact of this digital era that we live in. And then even, talking about like decline, we talked about decline in newspaper. The decline in newspaper revenue directly correlates to the onset rise of Facebook and Twitter and social media. People don't want to wait on the newspaper to print anymore.
No.
We want, and it even goes back to, these 24-hour news cycles that was created by stations like CNN, right? Then we got MSNBC. We're watching news all day long. But when news come quickly like that, people get it wrong. And they may or may not go back and correct it.
Correct.
How many times have you seen a news story, or something that's really interesting, like they break it, like there's this race to break news. And in the race to break news, so many people is getting it wrong.
That's correct.
Because you don't have the checks and balances, because you don't have the staff that you once had, because, all these media outlets have had, all of them, has had to cut back on their staff. So you don't have people fact-checking like you used to. You don't have people verifying information like you used to. It's just this race to break news. And then sometimes there's a news story that's like a really good, interesting story, but now we're off to the next story.
That's correct.
So we're not even following up on news like we used to.
Is it good to say that people have done a better job weaponizing news as well? And what I mean by weaponizing news is the bait and switch, so to speak.
Absolutely.
They'll bring out something as you. And here's a perfect example: Gaza, right? At one point, all you saw every day on the screen what was going on in Gaza, this, all the bombings, all the killings. You don't hear nothing about Gaza no more. And they still bombing, they still killing. But now we're over in Venezuela, other places. And when I say people have gotten better weaponizing the news, that's it, to be able to get your mind, like you say, give you so much news that is overload, where some people be like, don't even turn it on. There's so much stuff, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. And that's a form of weaponizing. Or it's like, hey, we're going to take your mind off of this to let you think about more of this is going on while this is still happening over there in the world.
Yes. I mean, we see it every day.
That's correct.
And I'm still a newspaper lover. I love the smell of ink and the feel and everything. But you also got to keep in mind that when we became more heavily reliant on broadcast and radio, they only have so much time to tell a story. They can only tell but so many stories.
That's correct.
In a given time. Now, podcasting allows us to be able to go a little more in depth and things like that if we find those people that's willing to do that. But the beauty about the newspaper was we can print as many pages as we can afford to pay for.
That's correct.
The paper can get up to 100 pages if need be.
Correct.
Right? If we could afford to pay for it, if we had to add dollars to support it. You only got so many hours in a day or
On
minutes in a news broadcast. You
news
can't
broadcast.
add more minutes to a news broadcast.
Let's talk about, because it sounds like what we're dealing with is everything from the news media to new media. The mission has always been the same. It's just the tools are just changed, and the type of tools that we're using to do that. Let's switch and going into some of this national politics with the mad exodus of all these black journalists that's leaving. You had your Don Lemons, Joy Reid, and a few others,
Tiffany Cross,
and others who have left. How do you see that right now with the way main media has treated black media? How do you see black journalists? How do you see our role now shaping up, and how is that really on our end, or what can we do more to make sure our story is being told?
It's interesting because back in 2010, when the decline in newspapers really reached all-time high, I began to, and I had been in the business for quite enough time to begin to think about it critically. I had two, what I call bright ideas, epiphanies or whatever, and I said that the future of media, or I thought newspapers in particular, was nonprofit. And now we see nonprofit newsrooms popping up. And I came to that conclusion because I felt like the advertising dollars that the Calling Post did get at the time were basically charity.
Okay.
And then I also began to think about individual journalists. The future for individual journalists, whether black or white, is entrepreneurial. Because long gone are the days where you can get a job at a media outlet and expect to retire. From that job. You're not going to see journalists putting in 50 years anymore. Those days are gone. A journalist may start their career, and then eventually it's going to have to shift to something else. So at this point, and I think particularly when it comes to black journalists, we have to learn how to be entrepreneurial. We have to learn how to monetize the work, because we've been so reliant on a paycheck for so long.
That's correct.
And I'll never forget, it was a very seasoned, very well-known, very accomplished journalist in this community. Broke my heart because they said to me, I don't know what I would do if I lost my job.
Wow. And
they was like telling me how like they admired how I had made this transition. And I'm like, but you. Right. I think I made the transition easily because I've always been entrepreneurial. I never wanted to be a journalist. And my degree is in English as opposed to journalism. So I always saw journalism a little bit differently than those who came through journalism training, formal journalism training.
And you made it. Part of it is you tried. I mean, at the end of the day, you tried and you made it. I mean, it wasn't easy.
No.
Not at all. As we get older and everything, I tell my kids, we can make it look easy now.
Right.
But trust me, when you was a kid, it wasn't easy. You just too small to understand what all of that meant. But no, it was never easy, So I really get that. How do you think what all of that means as it relates to telling the truth about our democracy? With the president being who he is, kicking out the way he talks to journalists in the newsroom, white and black, kicking them out of not having access to some of the news briefings that they should, and not being able to ask a good question that you may even want to challenge him on, because doing that may seem like you challenge him and he may get at you. What's the importance, you believe, of a good journalist right now? And I hear Roland Martin says this all the time. You say you can't be in black media and be afraid.
No, you can't. At the Calling Post, and I'm sure it's probably still there today, when you walk into the front door and go into the office, right on the wall beside the door was this sign that says, what we do here is not a matter of life and death. It's deeper than that.
Wow.
So, journalism has always been a risky business,
Yeah,
right?
it's
always been risky.
Always been, right.
And so when I would read that sign, I would always stop and just read that sign and say, okay, and what we do as Black journalists is even riskier because we're dispelling the myths,
Okay.
the narrative that has been shaped about Black people, right? We're telling the truth. If nothing else, we're telling the truth about who we are. That's counter to what mainstream media puts out.
That's correct.
Mainstream media ain't never cared about us.
No.
Never.
No, they showed us that in everything we just talked about.
I mean,
with Garrick Morgan when he drug them all out of the thing, and they still
even
gonna
to
give him
this
credit.
day. Okay, so NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, is celebrating their 50th anniversary currently. So that means this organization started in 1975. It was 44 founders. And those 44 founders, they took a risk because the majority of them were working for mainstream media outlets.
Okay.
They knew that they were risking losing their jobs. And they said, okay, they signed their name on a piece of paper anyway. 50 years later, we still have less than 2% of Blacks in mainstream media newsrooms that's in leadership.
Wow.
And the whole key to media is who's in leadership, who's making the decisions about what's news. So if the people that's making decisions about what's news don't look like us and for sure don't care about us, what's the story going to be?
Well, that's one of my questions. When you see major voices like Don Lemon, Joy Reid are being pushed out of networks, what kind of message you think that sent to the young reporters that are out there looking?
That this is not a place for you.
And so what can, and if it's not a place for them, what should they do?
We got to fight. We got to do what we always did as Black people. We got to continue to fight. You got to be like those 44 Black journalists 50 years ago who signed that paper and said, we're going to form this organization to train and prepare and develop Black journalists.
So you think there should be more outlets for more Black media outlets for more Black young reporters or people who want to get into there, because they're not going to get into
I personally think that we as Black people have to strengthen what we own.
There you go.
Because we cannot continue. I mean, I do think that there's a place for us in mainstream media if we're allowed in, given that kind of access, what have you. I don't think we should be up there timing to keep the job, because what is that doing for anybody?
Simulating.
Right?
Right.
But I also think that if we want to control our narrative, we have to be the owners, the decision makers about what's news.
Do you think freedom of speech is really free in America today?
No. Particularly not today, because you just said that you got journalists that don't even want to ask the tough question for fear of losing access.
Yeah. So at its pure form of freedom of speech,
yes.
No, because of that, what you just said. Yeah, I could probably go out there and yell and scream and say whatever I want to say, but that ain't nothing compared to if you're not going to use your speech to ask the tough questions to get the
and I always say, just in general, you could say what you want, but you got to be prepared for the consequences that's come along with it too. So, okay, now put that same mindset ideology on a journalist. And okay, I'm working for a mainstream media outlet, and my leadership has clearly told me, don't say this, don't do that, you're not, da-da-da-da-da. And I go out and do it anyway, there's a consequence for it. Now, if I'm ready to prepare to accept that consequence, so be it.
Do you think people are not taking enough chances?
No, because they want to keep their jobs. And I get it. You may got, you got a family, you got student that pay for this degree at these prestigious universities. You got student loans, you got rent to pay, you got, appearances to keep up.
How do you feel about these podcasting shows that's coming out now? With that, I know besides my show, which is a great show that you can catch and watch anytime you want to, but how do you feel about this new thing with everybody's podcasting now and all this information? We talked a little bit about information overload, and that's another part of it with that. And everybody has the ability to put up a mic, because we're talking freedom of speech again. So everybody has the ability to put up a microphone like this and say whatever they want to say. As a journalist, how do you feel about that?
I think it's a blessing and a curse, because it do give a Joy Reid, who is no longer on a network, or a Martin Rowland, opportunity to continue to do the work that they love to do, right? And they're trusted voices. But then we also have, Joe Blow starting a podcast, saying whatever, putting out misinformation, disinformation. So I think the real work that needs to be done is that media literacy has to now become top priority. We have to start teaching the general public how to consume media.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Give us, what is media literacy to you?
It's understanding the difference between facts and opinions. It's understanding how to check your sources. The basic things that you learn in journalism school.
Well, how can I apply that to the regular person, the average person who watching this program or something, who, my wife, perfect example, sit there, she'll listen, and is this real, is it not, and want to get in. She does better. She'll go Google and try to
go
dig
to Google
and just start looking. But I guess you say the best way is just start there, huh?
Start with Google. That's where I start with Google.
Right.
I hear something. I can't think of a good example right now, but I hear something, and the first thing I do is I go to Google, and I see, okay, is anybody else talking about this? If so, who's talking about it, right? Is it a government agency? Is it a reputable organization that is talking about it? Is it a reputable news outlet? Or is it all just,
Interesting. The president made a comment yesterday, and he had mentioned the fact that he said that civil rights was not good for white men, and said that, in fact, he made it that he believed that white men ought to be suing their employers and others as it relates to how reverse discrimination, and how civil rights was a total discrimination against white men. As a journalist, how you feel about that?
First of all, white men has had how many decades, centuries of a head start?
Correct.
To establish themselves. Black people have had, 60 good years?
Barely 60. Barely 60 good
It's
years.
Bernice King responded to that. Okay. Wayne was listening to it this morning. We was actually talking about this earlier today.
Okay.
And so I said, well, because I can be facetious. I said, facetiously speaking, it was bad for some white men. Those mediocre, subpar white men who want to get by on just being white. Yeah. Was it fair? No. Maybe not. But was slavery fair?
Right.
Was Jim Crow fair?
Right.
Was housing discrimination fair? Was job discrimination fair? But nobody's responding to these statements that he make in that way.
No, my thing with it is that, we've been so right now in a point where he just says whatever he wants to say.
He's a spin artist. I tell people,
and that's what I
he's
say.
a spin artist. He's a master spin artist.
He gets you thinking one thing, and then, like I said, they do this bait and switch thing, and he says some stuff that is just he knows going to just spin everybody off into a big old turmoil. No way in the world he should have been saying that on Martin Luther King's birthday. It's like, why would you even say that? And so with that being that, and the way that he's spilling this venom out into the community and everybody's getting it, one of the things that I looked at, and we transition into this literacy and liberation, I want to talk a little bit about that, is that we talk about what's going on now with the ICE agents and what's going on in Minnesota and everything fighting like that. I got two things I want to talk to you about as it relates to that. One is that there's a new way of people. We talked about the old school a little bit and how important that media and things of that nature was used in order to help us be able to fight what's going on. Newspapers were used to help put out the information to people so that they knew where we were going to be, what was going on, where you can get information from, where not to go. It was a whole lot of things that went in there into those newspapers. Now, with the new social media and the way that people interpret the movement now, because we're in a different movement than the movement we were back then. Now, I hear a lot of, well, it's not our fight. There's nothing that we should do with it. We shouldn't stay away from it. As black people, let it go. But I believe that this whole fight is a fight on humanity, is a fight against all of us. Now,
So
what's
wait a
your thoughts
minute,
on
you're
that?
hearing that this issue with ICE is not our fight?
I done heard people said that the issue with ICE, with the immigration, is not our fight. We as black folks ought to not get involved. Just like when it was going down with some
So
of
they
the
don't think that they going to come rounding us up next?
That's my point.
I mean, the
Yeah.
woman in Minnesota was a white woman,
That's
American citizen.
Well, the way they want to phrase it, and I was one who also said it also, was that, well, they've been killing black people the same way they've been killing her for years, and that's been going on, and I feel that, and I really felt that, and I threw that narrative out there also when I was talking, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I thought that we ought to go home and don't do nothing. It was just to say, okay, this happened, and it's been happening. Are y'all going to change what happened because of this, or y'all going to be America like y'all been? And like I said, they was America like they always been America. I tell people this all the time. It's not surprising that this woman died doing this, because during the struggle, there was a whole bunch of abolitionists who died too.
That's right.
There was people
That's
who went out
right.
there and they fought just like we did, and they died because
That's right.
when you're in a fight, you're in a fight. And we're right now is in a fight. And my biggest fear for black people by not us coming together, and I tie this to media, it's a long way of getting there, but I tie this to media is because of that, I feel that we don't have the togetherness that we need in order to make it through this fight. I don't think that we are, it's not the newspaper, it's the media and all these other things that are pulling us so far apart from each other that when it gets ready to come down, I don't think we as a people will be ready for it. And
I agree with that.
That's my whole thing with it. And I don't blame it. Well, media has a lot to do with it because of the information and the news we're getting. Social media has a hell of a lot to do with it because of what was taken out. But a lot of it is on us. And I just don't see us having it,
It goes back to, the famous Dr. King quote, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere.
And
I've always felt like with this whole immigration thing that they gonna start coming after us. I've always felt that, even before this Minnesota incident, because, okay, even if it's targeted towards Hispanics,
that's correct.
how I know you not Hispanic?
That's correct. I heard. I saw.
It's dark skinned Hispanics.
I saw ICE agent. Clearly, he was Mexican. ICE agent with his mask on, talking to another Mexican, telling him, where your papers, and are you're not legal? And he was like, well, how you know? He said, because you got an accent. He said, well, you got an accent. It was like the most crazy thing. And the dude still arrested him. He was like, you going with me? So we're just in tough times, and I'm just afraid that part of that, and this is why I want to get back on the media, is to be able to tell that story. One of the things that we were able to depend on when we were going to Huff riots and all the other stuff that was going on, you did have media that was portraying that from a black perspective that we can depend on that was telling the truth of what's going on. I'm afraid right now, especially here in Cleveland, that we just don't have that anymore. The Call Post newspaper is around, and bless his heart, but it's just not getting what we need in order to do that.
And just quite honestly, there's the lack of resources to get it done.
And I just want to...
It was a lack of resources when I was
doing
there.
it. Right. It's always been. Because it's black and we don't support the stuff like we should and doing that. But it's still important that we continue to fight on that. So I want to ask you this while we rounding third on this stuff is literacy. How important is literacy to you and in this fight for trying to get journalists back on track and the fight for continuing to get our story and have more storytellers out there in our community? How important is that?
Literacy is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I think that illiteracy is the root of all other ills.
Mm-hmm.
Incarceration, health. There are some numbers. I don't want to quote them now because I don't want to botch them, but there is some numbers. There's a hard number that has been determined of the cost of health care as a result of illiteracy. People unable to understand their diagnosis, to read their directions for their prescriptions, things like that. I mean, and it's in the billions of dollars.
Yeah, and they make you now, everything's online.
Everything's online.
Or something, you have to make your appointments online or you got to call. It's a lot to that, yeah.
The digital divide is, there's a lot of talk about that. How can we close that gap if you can't read because everything online pretty much requires reading? Okay, yes, you can listen to some audio or even some video, but reading develops critical thinking skills.
Okay.
So I can hear something, but if I don't have the skill set to think about it critically, I'm just consuming it and then very likely regurgitating it.
That's correct. Don't know what you're saying.
Don't even know what I'm saying.
There's a lot of people out there don't even know what they're saying. You say a whole lot of something, they ain't saying nothing.
And I think particularly for our community, it's just like voting, right? Like people die so that we can vote. It used to be illegal for black people to read.
They went to great lengths to make sure you couldn't do that.
Would kill the person who taught you how to read.
And most of the persons who, again, like we say, were white people. Because they were the only ones who knew how to read.
So I always say that something has to be extremely important,
right?
If they continue to fight to keep us from it. And there's two things there is a tremendous fight to keep us from. That's education and voting.
That's correct.
And we know them it's enough research out there. For them to be those are the great equalizers.
They're putting a lot of resources in that, and we've been fighting for that opportunity to vote for now over 50, 60 years and we still haven't seemed to be able to get those numbers. I think a lot of that again falls back on literacy.
Okay, let's go back to literacy because people. When I first got out here and being a literacy advocate, people was like, "Oh no, those numbers are incorrect." I said, "Look at your voter turnout."
That's correct.
Because you got to read the ballot, and you know how many times, and you're very politically astute. You read that ballot, and you got to scratch your head and read it again. And think. Imagine the person that has low literacy skills trying to understand what's on that ballot. How do I know what critical questions to ask a candidate?
And to that point, like you say, a critical candidate, or what does it all mean?
What does it all mean?
Because when you don't, it just don't mean anything to me, so it don't affect me, so why should I do it?
How many times do we know that people just bubble in any answer on the judicial
That's correct.
races?
That's correct.
But then you go stand, or to say voting don't affect me, but you got a court date set 2 months from now.
Yep. And mad when you go to court and come out there because you thought you was done unfair for a judge that you didn't vote against or vote for.
Exactly.
And that's the issue. When you hear the term from pain to power, what does that mean in your work?
You can always turn pain into power by telling your story. There's so many people we hear of today who have very tragic, seemingly tragic stories that has flipped it on its head just by sharing their story.
And let's go into this one. How do you protect the next generation of storytellers from burning out and censorship?
We have to continue to fight for what we know of as free speech to protect ourselves from censorship, because there is a battle every day to take that away from us. And so I think to protect the next generation of storytellers, it has to be, you have to, I've had to learn how to become a more well-rounded, I remember knowing that I needed a sabbatical. I was like, I need a sabbatical. And I was like, now I see why journalists take sabbaticals, because journalists, like, especially if you work in the newsroom and you're covering hard news, it's like being a police officer. You going from case to case to case without any mediation, stepping back, decompressing from that. You're just going from one situation to the next, and you're consuming all of that energy. So you have to learn how to, take care of your mental health. You have to know when to fall back and just take a break. One of the things that I am glad that I did not cover at the Calling Post is hard news, because my coworker who did, I'll never forget, one day he was like, Rhonda, I'm jaded. Because he covered the fires, the murders, all of that kind of stuff. And I was more on the human interest side. The hardest news that I covered was education.
Gotcha.
Now, CMSD education.
That's hard.
That's hard.
That's hard news.
But that was the hard, I wasn't going from murder to murder to fire to fire to police shootings, and all of that kind of stuff. That's hard. That's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to find some way to release that.
How do we rebuild trying to put a trusted media source out there that people can turn to or rely on? Not to say that everything that they hear from this source is true, but what do you see can be done to put that in place so that we can start to try to build the community together? Because to my point of where I was telling you, I think the day is coming. We're going to hear that bell, that horn, that what is that movie, Lateef? The horn that come out where it come out once a year, The Purge. Yeah, that Purge horn is coming. And when that Purge horn comes, it got to be somebody or something, I believe, that people need to start to go to get, hey, this is real. You better go lock your door because this ain't no joke. Right. Yeah. How do you think we rebuild that?
Save our legacy media outlets, like the Calling Post.
Okay.
I know we still have Calling Post. We still have the Chicago Defender is not even printing. They're not even printing a paper anymore. They're solely online. So you still have the Michigan Chronicle. You still have Pittsburgh Courier. There's still a good handful of Black-owned newspapers that are still printing. And I will say, shout out to Mr. King, because I don't think if it was any other owner of that paper during this time, I'm not quite certain it could be here.
Okay.
But because he ain't pressed about making $1 off of it.
I got you.
Right? he's very adamant that that paper survive.
But shouldn't it evolve?
It should. It absolutely should evolve.
Okay.
Absolutely, positively.
But that's up to him.
But that's a whole nother
That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
But making sure that those papers survive so that we have those, because you can still pick up a phone and call that state house and say, I'm with the Calling Post, and they going to respond.
That's correct.
To you. Or any other black media outlet that has well over 100 years in existence.
It's still on the political list. So, hey, every campaign or anything you do.
And a Calling Post endorsement still matter.
It's still there. Yeah, it's still there.
But then I also think that we have to be adapting to evolution of media with podcasts such as your own, you know, and others. But we also, we have to own. Like, I'm a big, I don't know, are you following Isaac Hayes III?
Yes, fan base.
Fan base. Because social media, YouTube can shut you, YouTube can totally suppress.
Just anything. Just like any of the other platforms.
Turn you off.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Don't like what you're saying.
Don't like what you're saying.
Right.
So we have to own digital media outlets. We have to build robust email lists so that we can communicate with each other outside of the public space.
So to your point, it has to be multifaceted.
It definitely has to be multifaceted.
We need newspapers. We need media. We need all of that.
We need them all.
Email lists, like you say, down to basic, like, did you read the blog?
Yes.
I mean, because we may end up going back there. You never know. And the way things are, we'd be lucky if we could turn the computer on to get a blog at this point. So reading may be, like they say, fundamental. Just exactly like it was supposed to be, you know? So I'm going to let you close us out, Rhonda, by telling us anything that you think that's important that you want to reach out to the future journalists and people that are out there. I'm going to let you do two, because you do two things. I want you to speak on the literacy piece and if you got something that's coming up and anything, you can let the folks know about that as well. But I'm going to take your time, whatever's on your mind, and go ahead and let us know what's going on.
We have to embrace literacy. That's number one. I tutor at Charles Dickens School. I tutor second and third graders. And our babies just don't know how to read. They're not prepared for the third grade reading test. And we all know about the cradle to prison pipeline, preschool to prison pipeline. And so, you know, it's said that if you, up until third grade, you learn to read, and then after that, you read to learn. Yes, after third grade, you read to learn. So I see kids that's going into the fourth grade. I've been doing this for 6 years now. They're not proficient, and they're just moving these kids along.
That's correct.
So these kids are going to end up becoming deflated, dejected, likely dropping out. We need people just to step up and like make this a top priority that our kids know how to read. This has to be the last generation of children becoming adults and don't know how to read. That's black. That's key, because everything else is moot points. That's the moot point. We could fight for media, we could all of this, but if I can't even understand what I'm hearing, comprehend. It's going over. It's like being 3 years old and sitting in the church service on Sunday morning. You don't understand what the preacher's saying. Exactly. So that's very critical. I encourage parents just to take a more active role in their children's education. As far as journalists is concerned, if you still have a heart and passion, if this is an interest, definitely go after it. But also keep in mind, what else can I do? So, maybe you embrace technology so you understand how the algorithms work or, how to build websites or different things like that, so you can build something that you own, that we own, because ownership that's critical to our survival. Not only our success,
correct,
but our survival as a people.
So let me ask you, you still do your let everybody know about your wake up call. I get my ding every morning. I'll be like, that's Rhonda.
So, last year was a very hectic year, hosting the National Association of Black Journalists convention here in Cleveland, and a couple of other things that was going on. So, in October, towards the end of the year, I just had to sleep in.
Because you up early.
For a few weeks. But I'm back at it.
Oh,
I'm back at it. I'm up every morning.
She's up before the sun come up.
At 5 o'clock, I go live on Instagram, and it's the 5 a.m. Writers Club. And it was really, it was created out of the pandemic as a response to the pandemic, because I had books that I had started writing and needed to finish.
Okay.
And so I knew I had friends who had books that, they wanted to finish. So it was a way for us to create time in the morning before, the world wakes up and start to beat you down.
Got you.
You can, have that time where you can work on your own personal projects. Now, you don't have to be a writer.
Right. Okay.
To, log in. We talk about all kind of stuff. Some people use the hour to work out. Some people use the hour for prayer and meditation. Some people go back to sleep. It's okay. Whatever it is you feel like, I always say, whatever it is you feel like you need to do to make yourself whole and happy and, get you through the day. But so I'm live on Instagram every morning at 5 o'clock for a check-in, and then at 6:15 for a checkout.
That was Rhonda Crowder. She's our guest on our program today. And every time I sit in this chair, it reminds me of what true power is and how much we need to do to protect it. And what I mean by that is that the power of our people to be able to get our message out to our community, the power that you have within yourself to do what you need to do better for our community. And Rhonda is a perfect example of that. She's been writing and looking out for our community. Who's Who in Black Cleveland is a big event she does every year right here in the city of Cleveland. And I was one of those people in who's honored one year as well. So I want everybody to make sure you get an opportunity to follow Rhonda Crowder and all the things that she's doing. We will leave information in the description on how you can reach Rhonda Crowder and Associates, her agency, and any more information and her handles, how you can follow her on all her social media platforms. So till next time, we want everybody to continue to fight for what's right. Peace.
This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell.